Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. It seems like there's always something big happening in the legal marijuana industry, and this week is no exception, with adult use cannabis becoming legal nationwide in Canada as of October 17th. Today, Ann and Louis are chatting with Representative Earl Blumenauer, a House Democrat from Oregon, one of those Western states that really led the charge on marijuana legalization. He's represented Oregon as a congressman for more than 20 years and has been a pivotal player in the marijuana legalization movement since its beginning, with Oregon being one of the first states to legalize medical cannabis back in 1998, making history again in 2012 when it passed adult use. I think it's fair to say that Representative Blumenauer is well qualified to talk about our favorite topic. So don't sit back, lean forward. And now on to our interview with Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
And it's been almost a year to the day since we started doing this together.
And Mazel Tov.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
It's a baby. Woo! And first of all, I want to thank you. I have had so much fun. This has been such a great opportunity for me to learn, and also because I can't do stand-up, I can do my bad jokes here, and I get people to kind of shake their head on their headphones. But I really appreciate you partnering. And in all truth and full disclosure, this was your idea. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Well, it was my idea, but it was not my idea to co-host. That's also important. So that was your idea. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome.
To get out of my comfort zone.
So speaking of getting out of the comfort zone, since we're almost a year into this, or we are exactly a year into this, I know that we have been talking about how do we make the show better? Because while some of the stuff we do is great and the hostfuls are fun, I think that we're not drawing the audience in, right? Like you guys who are listening, oftentimes we jump right into the interview. So we had a brainstorm and we talked with Nick and we talked with Shay, and actually we talked with another guy here, John Goldberg, and came up with a new idea that on a weekly basis, we are going to start the show by asking one journalist or one key influencer, what is the most important story we should all be paying attention to? And it's not going to be more than 3 to 5 minutes. And then after that, we'll get into the interviews. But it's the kind of thing where hopefully you and I will both go, oh, shit, I need to be paying attention to that and go read something. But more importantly, you guys who are listening will go, that was awesome. And then we'll get into the interview. And this week's interview is just awesome. Mad props out to Nick Opich for landing this, and he gets to join us every now and then. And you and Nick have done a great job co-hosting when I've been out, and Nick has done a great job with me when you've been out. But he books a lot of the guests, and today's guest is a major get.
For sure. And I think we also need to thank Shay. And for his guidance and for his tutelage and for his just being an overall awesome partner. And if you guys aren't listening to Marijuana Today Daily, you are missing out. So please, if you're listening to us, you're going to find value in Marijuana Today Daily. Okay.
And so today, our first journalist who's going to be joining us is kind of a journalist, but he's absolutely brilliant. It's Alan Brockstein from 420 Investor and New Cannabis Ventures. So, Alan, what have we all been missing?
All right, so I'm going to surprise the audience. I'm sure most people are thinking Canada legalizing, and I don't want to deny the importance of that, but there's something bigger going on, and that is the land grab in the United States. And I want to break it into two pieces. So first of all, we saw Canopy Growth make a very large acquisition of substantially all the assets of Colorado-based EBU. To be real clear, this doesn't mean that Canopy Growth is entering the United States, but it's an IP purchase of a U.S. company that just kind of drives home a central theme that the cannabis capital of the world in terms of intellectual capital is in the United States. And the money capital may be in Canada, and which gets me to the second point. We have seen two very large transactions announced, ironically, on the evening after Canada legalized. They were kind enough to let Canada enjoy its day.
They had
But
their day.
right. But by the time the day was over, we had two relatively recent special purpose acquisition corps, or SPACs, finally announced their big plans. And one of them, the more recent one, is Canaccord Genuity's SPAC. And your listeners should probably know Canaccord Genuity, very actively involved in the space. They're betting big on the United States, and what they've done is created this vehicle to merge with Columbia Care, which is one of the larger national footprint cannabis companies, 100% on the medical side in the United States. So
60 stores.
So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to me, and it had a pretty low valuation, I think, based on just what I would have expected, an implied value of 1.35 billion. But the SPAC traded up like 35% yesterday. Point being, though, well, let me get the second one was one that was done, Cannabis Acquisition Strategy. No, Cannabis Strategy Acquisition Corp. That's it. It was done in December as well, and they announced a roll-up of 5 different cannabis companies in the United States, Sierra Naturals in Massachusetts, and then 4 others in basically in Nevada. And so they have used this vehicle to bring together these companies. This isn't the first time we've seen Canada obviously be the source of capital for these U.S. deals. So I think this is really the big story. Canada legalizing has been a big story. It's been the big focus of everybody. But what's really going on, in my opinion, is a shift in the attention to the United States, whether it's figuring out ways to get the IP out of the United States, like Canopy Growth has done with EBU, or actually putting into the public markets some of the leading revenue generators in the country.
That was awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, Congressman. It's Ann Donahoe. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about the memo earlier this week. You made news by issuing a really bold roadmap, very specific roadmap for Democrats to use for the new Congress. And you even said to Bloomberg that you think that cannabis will, quote, move in the next 6 months. Why do you feel like now was the time to issue that memo?
Well, this is the culmination for me of years of working on this issue. And I think we're watching it come to a head. We're having 4 more elections this fall. In fact, I'm in Missouri tomorrow campaigning for their ballot measure. We have more candidates than ever before that are actually talking about this. We have had remarkable progress despite the unrelenting opposition of the Republican leadership in Congress. We now have virtually every Democrat on board, and we have several dozen Republicans. The major roadblocks have been 3 people. I mean, it's the Republican head of the Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte, the Republican Speaker, Paul Ryan, and the Republican chair of the Rules Committee, Pete Sessions, who've been just thwarting our efforts. And 2 of the 3 are not coming back. And candidly, I think Pete Sessions is in the race of his life, in part because he's been the number 1 enemy of marijuana reform in Congress. And there's a very good chance that Democrats will take control. So I think it's all teed up, ready to go. We have more support from the public than ever before. We have 3 states that are going to, 2, maybe 3 states that will be added to the column, and it looks like we've worked out a deal in Utah. The time is right.
So this is Lewis speaking, Congressman. And over the last couple months, I've said repeatedly that I think that we're going to see an October surprise related to cannabis specifically, that because of what happened with GW Pharma and the FDA's approval of Epidiolex, that the president will do something, whether it be deschedule or reschedule or do something that he'll be able to claim that he legalized cannabis. Do you see something like that happening before the midterms, or do you think I'm just kind of talking out my butt?
Well, I can't imagine anybody who knows what this guy's going to do.
I don't think he knows what he's going to do.
Well, and that's the case. But I think it would. They have an administration that has been decidedly unfriendly. They have had opportunities for 20 months to make a difference, and they haven't. They've allowed Jeff Sessions to cast a cloud. I'll tell you, the October surprise is that we're going to elect the most pro-cannabis Congress in history, and we're starting from a pretty good space. We will have more successes at the ballot box that follow up on success after success we've had around the country. The October surprise is that the people will speak, and we're going to be in a position to be able to act on the outline that I put out this week.
Well, I like that October surprise much better than I like Lewis's idea of an
Me
October
too.
surprise.
Trust me, me too.
But worst case scenario, and I certainly don't mean to be negative because I do really believe in this blue wave and that there's a lot of energy in the Democratic base. But let's say the Democrats don't win the House and there's no October surprise. Do you think that your colleague, Representative Dana Rohrabacher, is right when he says that Trump and the Republicans will get this done in 2019?
Well, the table is set, and we have seen remarkable progress. But if they continue to have leadership that is opposed to us, like Pete Sessions, this was teed up. There was no reason that this should have been a problem. As you know, my veterans access legislation passed both the House and the Senate last Congress. We should have been able to move. One of the things I've worked very hard in when I established the Cannabis Caucus was to make it bipartisan. I cooperate with any member of the House in either party, and in fact, people in the Senate who are advancing legislation that's consistent with our principles. As a practical matter, the Republicans have been very, very hard to read, and their leadership has been hostile. There was a chance for people to have forced this earlier. I hope that regardless of who's in charge, that we move forward with my blueprint. I just know that if Democrats are in charge, it's much more likely to happen.
Has leadership, when they saw the blueprint, did they say, "Yeah, we're in," or were they because all of the polling says that bipartisan Republicans, Democrats, self-proclaimed conservatives or progressives, everybody supports cannabis either from a medicinal or an adult use perspective. But the Democratic leadership doesn't seem to have embraced it. It's not like Nancy Pelosi is out there running on this issue. So when you issued the memo, what did the leadership say?
Well, understand, in this climate, when there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are being spent to misrepresent the Democratic positions and to attack candidates. Look at Beto O'Rourke, who has been consistent back 10 years ago when he was a city council person in El Paso, believing that we ought to reform marijuana legislation. And Ted Cruz and Dark Money are pretending like he wants to somehow legalize every single drug, get rid of all controls, be able to assault our families. That is what the other side would do if they were given an opening. And candidly, I understand that Nancy Pelosi is not saying this is a major priority. That's all you'd hear for 2 weeks, misrepresenting what she said and what she believes in. Go look at Nancy's record. She has supported every single one of our votes on the floor of the House. She has been clear that she thinks that reform makes sense. But I think she shouldn't say that this is a major priority. It doesn't. It's not my number one priority, but it is important to do, and we can do more things than one at a time. So we can deal with the healthcare crisis, deal with the immigration crisis, deal with the fact that America's infrastructure is falling apart, and still follow the outline that I presented. There's an opportunity for each committee over the next few months of the new Congress to be able to lay the groundwork for this. Many of these things are teed up and ready to go. So I think one of the first things that will happen deals with the insanity of forcing state legal marijuana businesses to be conducted on an all-cash basis. Now, I've been working in this space for years. I have traveled from Bangor, Maine to Santa Barbara. I've worked on the ballot measures. I've never met a single person who thinks that state legal cannabis businesses should be conducted on an all-cash basis. The notion that we have people with backpacks and shopping bags full of $20 bills scurrying around every day is lunacy. It's not safe. It doesn't make sense from a business perspective. And if you really care about law enforcement, it's an invitation to tax evasion and money laundering. We've got legislation ready to go with Ed Perlmutter and Denny Heck from Colorado and from Washington State, both on the Financial Services Committee. I think when we're in charge, that legislation moves in a matter of months.
So this issue has really brought to light the concept that, politics makes strange bedfellows, and your partnership with Congressman Rohrabacher, and then the forward-looking positions that Congressman Corbello or David Joyce from Ohio have taken, they're all relatively very conservative Republicans, and other than you and just a handful of others, it doesn't really feel like the Democrats have embraced this issue with open arms. I'm joking that they should be holding a plant, running to the polls with it, but they're not. And again, the polling is so strongly in favor, especially amongst Democrats, of this issue. I just don't. I wish I could understand more why the Democrats as a party aren't embracing this, because it hits on social justice, it hits on tax, it hits on money for infrastructure, all that stuff.
Well, I reject the premise. There are a number of Democrats who, in fact, embrace full legalization. Virtually all of them support medical marijuana. Look at the number of candidates running around the country. It's just not true that there aren't a wide variety of Democrats who are there and who are supportive. And in the Senate, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, my own senator, actually both my senators, Jeff Merkley and Ron Wyden, have been extraordinarily supportive. It is what we see with Tim Walz, who's running for governor of Minnesota, but having advanced on the Veterans Committee, moving for marijuana research. Barbara Lee. I mean, there are candidates and members of Congress who have been very clear and very forceful. Hakeem Jeffries, Gary Nadler. I reject the proposition. Now, part of it is that there's a lot of issues that people are contending with, and there is a crisis every day, from Donald Trump setting his hair on fire and trying to put it out with a hammer.
That's a great image.
Well, I mean, it's so there is literally a crisis a day. But if you look at where the candidates stand, if you look at where our members have voted and what they believe in, and the legislation that they've co-sponsored, I mean, there is a wide variety of legislation. We have something like over 30 pieces of legislation in the House, and the majority of the people who are supporting these are Democrats. Now, I encourage the work with Carlos and Dave and Dana. That's good, and I have worked with them at every turn because we're trying to get something through this Republican Congress that has sort of shut us down. But I'm sorry. I've talked to, I've sent material and engaged over 90 Democrats running for Congress. I know where they're at, and a number of them are, in fact, talking about it. They support it. They're not ducking it on the campaign trail. But again, the same point that the climate that we have now, it's so easy to mischaracterize what people have said and what they believe. And if somebody claimed that this was, their number one priority or even one of the top priorities, they would have this millions of dollars of dark money misrepresent what they said and what they believe and create problems for them. They don't need to do that. We don't need them to do that to be successful. We just need people to be clear, to support simple common sense things for the industry, to make sure that they support eliminating the banking problems, the way the federal government gets in there, interferes with research, the veterans access issue. People stand behind the simple common sense steps that are in the blueprint that I outlined, and I think you will see support for moving it forward.
Congressman, you're spending a lot of time this week in Missouri on the campaign trail, and you've said that if Missouri is willing to support medical marijuana, you think the tide will change nationally and that we're in the home stretch. Why Missouri? And I guess my follow-up there is, why do you think the federal government as a whole has been so far behind this particular issue? And not just in the era of Trump, but why couldn't Obama get it done either? I guess that's a big question, but take it piece by piece, however you like.
What you have on the federal level, let me take these in reverse order. On the federal level is the legacy of Richard Nixon weaponizing the opposition to marijuana reform. He rejected the recommendation of his own Blue Ribbon Commission, chaired by the governor of Pennsylvania, for heaven's sakes, who concluded, that the concerns about cannabis are overblown, that it's no more harmful than many things that are legal, in fact, less harmful than things that are legal, like cigarettes. Nixon
or alcohol.
Decided for purely political reasons that he was going to demonize young people and people of color with marijuana and his war on drugs. And that's been deeply embedded, and it was continued with Reagan, Republicans in Congress at every turn. We've spent $1 trillion on this. Obama, to his credit, when we had the election in 2012, he indicated he had bigger fish to fry. He wasn't going to interfere, even though it wasn't legal under federal statute. Under his watch, the Cole memo was promulgated. There was Treasury guidance. It was kind of live and let live, and as long as people followed the rules, the federal government wouldn't interfere with them. I had hoped that we might go further, but the fact is that the decision that Obama made, and the fact that he was the first president of the United States to tell the truth. Yeah, I smoked marijuana, and frankly, it was less dangerous than stuff that was legal. I just think that we're watching these pieces come together. They've been building. The reason I pointed out the significance of Missouri, that's the show me state, right? It's in the heartland. It's a political battlefield. And there's lots of dark money and other things flowing around. And you've got 3 flipping ballot measures, including one that was written by a guy who would make himself the cannabis czar, which is sort of weird. But if in Missouri, that with all the political cross currents, if the show me state goes ahead, which I think it will, and approves ballot measure 2, I think it's an important signal to more of middle America. We've won the coast. We've won a number of more progressive states. If Missouri comes on board, I think other dominoes will fall.
So this week, we are recording this on October 19th, was a huge week for cannabis. And some would say maybe the biggest week yet in the history of the legalization movement, with Canada going federally legal on October 17th. Do you think this is going to have any impact on our policy, whether it be from a financial services perspective or anywhere at the federal level? I mean, can the Trump administration look to Trudeau and say yes or no?
Well, you're right. This has been a huge week. When Canada went full legal on October 17th. This is only the second country. And Canada is a sophisticated, rich, forward-thinking country, but it's not uniformly progressive. For the administration, the government to campaign on legalization and then to follow through on it is extraordinarily significant. And it's already having an effect in the United States. You look at what's happening with companies that have operations on both sides of the border, taking advantage of Canada being able to have listings on their stock exchange for cannabis companies. People are investing in one another. It's the Canadian border goes along virtually, I think all but 2 of the states have medical or adult use, from Washington to Maine. It's opened the eyes and the opportunity for joint investment. I think this is extraordinarily significant.
So,
at the same time, we're looking at interest in Mexico. They're interested in legalization. The notion of a North American cannabis coalition is, I think, remarkable.
You mentioned the border, and there have been now a series of Canadians who have been stopped at the border who work in the industry. And Americans, and we know some of our clients have actually been stopped at the border who are C-suites in public American companies. What's going on there? I mean, is this Jeff Sessions? Is this Donald Trump? I mean, why is this happening?
Well, part of the problem is this misdirected war on drugs gives people, the American authorities at the border, the right to deny permanently entry in the United States for anyone who admits that they've used marijuana. Problems with people who are in the marijuana business. That's why I introduced what I call the Maple Act this week. Announced it. We'll introduce it when we're back in session. that would fix this. Because, and one of the reasons we announced it this week when Canada went full legal is that there are a lot of people that do not know that they're at risk. They don't have to answer that question from the Border Patrol. But if they do answer it truthfully and admit to using cannabis, they can be denied entry to the United States for life. So we need to have people be aware of this. And then we need to, I think most members of Congress were unaware. And I think this is one of the pieces of legislation that we'll be able to move pretty quickly to fix, because it's insane. People who are involved in a legal business or people who are taking their medicine being denied entry in the United States for the rest of their life, nobody wants that. And I think this is an example of something we'll be able to change, and it's why I introduced the Maple Act.
Congressman, we have 2 more questions for you. Do you have 5 more minutes for us?
I'm going to have to wrap this up because I'm running out of voice.
Okay.
So one more quick question. We have a new segment on the show that we call While You Were Sleeping. Can you tell us one thing that the public or press is missing when it comes to cannabis? In other words, what's the one story that you wish you were reading in the Oregonian, but you are not?
Well, what I just said about just a really remarkably foolish policy that will deny entry of people in the United States from Canada who take their medicine. I think that is outrageous. I think people don't know. I think the more people understand, the easier it will be to change. And I think this is an example of the incremental progress that we make. And when these dominoes start falling with the passage of my Maple Act, the Veterans Access legislation, the banking, we start getting the momentum, and I think these things will pass not only through the House, but through the Senate, and set the stage for the ultimate treatment of marijuana like we treat alcohol. States will do what they want as long as they follow reasonable regulations. They're reasonably transparent, and I think America's ready for it.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for giving us this time. We really appreciate it. And by the way, the question I asked about the thesis, which you completely corrected me on, was hopefully taken as a setup, because it is great to see that the Democrats are embracing, forward-thinking and truly embracing the issue. And you have been a phenomenal advocate, so thank you very much.
I think you're going to like the new class of Democrats being elected, and I think they're going to help us get where we need to be.
Excellent.
Awesome. We can't wait. Go vote, everyone listening.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Congressman.
Good afternoon.
Thanks to Congressman Earl Blumenauer of Oregon. We will have links to everything that we talked about, from his memo to his legislation matrix to the Maple Act in our show notes. Make sure you go vote, go register to vote, find out where you're supposed to vote, do your research, be a good citizen. For more on the Congressman in general, head over to earlblumenauer.com or check him out on Twitter at @RepBlumenauer. Or if you want to chat with us, you can always find us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle at KCSA_cannabis, as well as KCSA-cannabis.com. Or you can email Lewis at greenrush@kcsa.com. He loves hate mail.
I got my first piece of hate mail. It was awesome.
So exciting.
I was so exciting.
And don't forget to subscribe to The Green Rush in your favorite podcatcher. That's one take Shay, one take